Washington, all of the right people are concerned and scared by what Trump was doing. Scared, not because there's anything worse being tried to you, but because this is the first time in decades that a president of the United States has had the courage and the foresight to undermine the radical woke liberal project. It's a real honor to be here, and I will, of course, very happily be called a friend of Spain, of France, of Hungary, of every nation represented here. And I just want to pause for a moment and say two things before giving you a little bit of intelligence about what's going on in Washington. The first is, it's important that this American tell you, I'm here not representing a big brother country, but a country that wants to work with you shoulder to shoulder to restore sovereignty for every single person on the planet. And the second is, particularly given his leadership of this wonderful party in Europe and his leadership here in Spain and a friendship that I have come to treasure in the last 2 years, please give a great round of applause to Santiago Abascal. And let the record show this American does find this architecture rather overwhelming and thrilling. To my friend, Candace de Orban, another great leader, it's always good to be with you. My new friend, Madame Lecan, from the state of Louisiana, and all of you, Mr. Milders, look forward to visiting with you, and all of you, I have talked to you, Mr. Salvini. I want to say that what is going on in Washington is the restoration of hope. And it's a restoration of hope that sometimes the media likes to call a populist revolt. It's not merely a populist revolt. It is the end of the post-Cold War liberal elite managerial consensus. And that consensus, that word is being used by our American media, filtered by your media in your countries, to undermine the great work already of the second Trump presidency. And so I'm here to tell you a few things about what's going on in America. And not just for that to be helpful to you, but recognizing the difference of each of our countries, hopefully for this to be an encouragement to you, that if it can happen in the Biden-Harris regime in America, it can happen in your country too. On our side of the planet, President Trump's victory has reawakened the American spirit. Day by day, he's reviving democratic accountability, cultural consciousness, something that we've been inspired by President Orban's leadership in Hungary, and something that is very important to all of this as well, and that's national solidarity. You know, sometimes we are referred to by our presidents in America as the last best hope on earth. Every single one of your countries with great leadership can be the last best hope on earth, because each of us as humans is wired to be free, wired to be sovereign, and that managerial consensus that you know all too well in Brussels has been standing in the way. But let me tell you where I think might be helpful to understand Trump's victory. You first have to remember who his adversaries were and are. The woke, international, progressive elite, whatever you call them, is fundamentally a hate group. They hate the United States, they hate democracy, they hate Christianity, they hate Judaism, they hate the West, and I don't need to tell you, they hate you. And what Donald Trump is doing with every single executive order 3 weeks into his presidency is drawing a line in the sand and telling them the gig is up. This is our country, this is our world, and it's time you go on. Let's be honest, this opposition isn't just a project of the radical left. There have been plenty so-called conservatives in the United States and in your countries who are co-conspirators in this betrayal over the last few decades.
They spent a generation or more trading away their ancient heritage, their sovereignty, their solidarity in exchange for things like corporate profits of your group. And you probably get discouraged by this. Many of you have told me in the last day, in the last couple of years as I've gotten to know you, that there's more hope in the United States than there is in your countries. I'll leave it to you as the expert in your countries, but I can't help but think that if I remind you how bad and dire our situation was over the last 4 years, how bad and dire it was when by merely a quarter of an inch, the greatest president we've had in modern history survived in assassination attempt last July, that you too should be encouraged by what he's doing. The story may sound familiar because your countries have suffered from the same issues. But as I would detail in some specificity, these policies are reigniting freedom and sovereignty in the United States and in the West. Let me give you some examples. In Donald Trump's first term in office, he challenged or disrupted holy graft. It gave Americans a reprieve, gave us an opportunity to start fighting. But the first lesson to draw from this second term is that what we're seeing now is the benefit of being prepared with policies, with personnel, and most importantly, something the president and the vice president have in spades, backbone. Just when the elites are telling you you need to go slow, which is what we're starting to say, and Washington is for, you need to do the opposite and do it faster. You have seen, no doubt, in the last several days, reports in your respective media outlets, news about USAID. And if your media outlets are recording it the way they're recording it in the United States, they are portraying Donald Trump as an ogre, a monster, who's depriving poor children around the world of their food and their shelter. USAID is the greatest bloody laundering operation in American history, and God bless you for bringing it to an end. And I'll tell you, working with some great investigative researchers at the Heritage Foundation, what we have unearthed, other people have unearthed about USAID is just the tip of the iceberg. We're going to reveal, and the Trump administration already is, a huge set of problems that explains a lot about why the elites wanted us to be focused on everything except. But in case you're reading it, you've been, think about what USAID was funded. Transgender comic books in Peru. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, jobs programs, and Serbia. And who knows how many other godforsaken initiatives in your own countries. The second example I would mention is another thing, another topic that gives a lot of attention in the West, and that's tariffs. The two things that I would say is, what conservatives in the United States want, no doubt with President Trump and his wonderful administration law, is a healthy bilateral relationship with individual countries, but as it honors the sovereignty and freedom of each of the respective peoples involved in those free treaties. Gone are the days that the United States bends the knee to the World Health Organization, to the United Nations, and yes, the Europeans. Gone are the days that your countries should do the same. But the second example I mentioned is a couple of Sundays ago, when President Trump said that he would be slapping a tariff on Colombia for refusing the return of illegal aliens, that is a return for them. And within 37 minutes, the president of Colombia acquiesced. I don't say this to thump my chest and marry, maybe a little bit, but to give Donald Trump credit for saying he doesn't care for the rules. He doesn't care what we're supposed to. What he is doing is restoring the rule of law in his country, and that has been run roughshod by the elites. The third thing third example, to give you some insight into what he's doing, is using the same approach on Canada and Mexico.
And within a couple of days, did not come, just a day, the president of Mexico sent 10,000 troops to the southern border, and the soon-to-be former Prime Minister of Canada decided that he would find $100 billion to fund an effort against fentanyl traffic. And keep in mind, fentanyl is the leading cause of death of Americans under the age of 40. All of this to say, this is the lesson. Whatever the issues in your country, we're bound by concerns about immigration, about borders, about economic out, but most of all about cultural identity and about the sovereignty of our peoples. That's what President Trump is doing. And I will touch on something that maybe your media hasn't covered. And if they haven't covered, or they have a good job, sure. And that is President Trump's announcement that soon he will begin dismantling the U.S. Department of Education. Now, the way most of our countries are structured, that might be sort of a foreign, if not challenging concept. But as you think, all education in the United States could go away. But let me give you some detail here. I'm a fifth-generation educator. I only went to government-funded schools in the United States. I think it's a notable objective for all of our countries. But since 1979, the U.S. Department of Education was created. We've spent $1 trillion on education. And all that is produced is educational attainment that has gone down on every demographic route in the country. This is a country like yours that wants to spare no expense when it comes to educating DI, particularly poor children. But what President Trump has recognized is that that gross over-sentimentalization of power and the name of education has not only caused education to worsen, but has also caused these agencies, these schools, to become vehicles of the woke indoctrination that you know all too well. This is the point. Yes, as an American, I can celebrate that America's back under the Trump-Vance administration. I could tell you that in Washington, all of the right people are concerned and scared by what Trump was doing. Scared, not because there's anything worse being tried to, but because this is the first time in decades that a president of the United States has had the courage and the foresight to undermine the radical rogue liberal project that they have been building for ASEAN. And the purpose of that project, make no mistake, is to weaken the freedom and sovereignty that binds us all together. And so I'll make this observation for you. If you're trying to figure out how you could plug into what's going on in the United States at whatever level, but also if you're trying to make sense of what's going on culturally, historically. I think your own principles, some unequal, your focus on sovereignty, on freedom, on identity, on revitalizing this spirit of your own peoples is precisely what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are doing. And I would expect in the coming days and weeks that as our Congress begins to do it together, very important to cover this, which is a federal budget, that you will see real political momentum happen. But ultimately, the most important thing that's happening in the United States is what each of you does with your own leadership in Brussels and your respective national capitals. And this room is a perfect place to consider this. And that's the revitalization of tradition. You think about tradition in a political sense. It's powerful in a political sense because it's powerful in our souls, in our hearts. Each of our families has a tradition. Each of our countries has a tradition, and we have multiple cultural traditions as we do in the United States. And the promise of the West, and hopefully one day, or globally, the promise of the entire world, is that honoring that tradition in our policies and our politics, as Donald Trump is doing, as you are doing, as the Patriot Party in Europe, reminds us what Gustav Mahler said. That tradition is not the worship of the ashes, but the preservation of the fire.
Let that
Let that preservation of the fire leave us, as we like to say in the South, in the United States, a fire in our belly. Not just for particular policies that are important to our respected political parties, but to constantly reject the falsehoods of the media, of the left, of their associates, all of which want to end sovereignty and freedom in your countries. God bless you, and God bless Donald Trump. So the story, as he said to his anointing,
this revolution of common sense. Thanks.
The Kevin Roberts Show is brought to you by more than 10 million supporters of the Heritage Foundation. The executive producer is Crystal Kate Bonham. Sound design by Lauren Evans, Mark Guiney, Tim Kennedy, and Joseph Fonsbakowski. For more information and to subscribe, please visit heritage.org.